I don't know if any of you remember show and tell from when you were kids. I'm still a kid at heart, so I'm doing a little show and tell today. I brought a carpet with me that I got years ago in Turkey. Anybody been to Turkey? It's a great place. Constantinople, Istanbul. Anyway, well, I got this in Istanbul, and it's a style of carpentry. It's handmade, so you can imagine the amount of work that went into something like this. This style of carpet is very busy. A lot of details. There's all sorts of, after Mass, if you want, you're welcome to come and take a closer look at it, but there's all sorts of images and shapes and lots of details. But there's a lot of order to it. It's silk and wool, so it's kind of soft, but it's orderly and very symmetric. That's that style, a lot of geometric styling to it. So there's order and symmetry and beauty to it until you turn it around. And then it just looks like a pile of threads. It's chaotic, it's ugly, it's rough, it's messy, right? It's the same carpet, whether it looks like this or it looks like this. The same carpet, just two different sides. Well, my friends, I think this is a metaphor for life. Because isn't life a lot like that? Sometimes life just seems to be in order. Everything's going away that we expected, and it's predictable, and it's soft or smooth, and things are all right. And then other times life is just a mess, right? Rough, chaotic, can't quite see the meaning through the details. The question I want us to ponder tonight is this: are we giving ourselves wholeheartedly, trusting in God, whether life looks like this or like this? So we'll come to the end of our series, 4-week series, on giving ourselves wholeheartedly to God as disciples. And I guess the Cardinal preached last week at this Mass, but Father Mike at the Sunday Masses preached on one aspect of being wholehearted in our relationship with God, and that is not to be stingy, right? Be generous in service and with all of our resources and giving to others, and even including to the church and ministry and in our stewardship of the community. Well, I don't know about you, but that kind of stung me a little bit because I can be pretty downright stingy sometimes. So that call to be generous as an aspect of being wholehearted in our relationship with God is important. And as I said, it can be challenging to us. Tonight I want to finish out this series by contemplating that message. How do we remain wholehearted regardless of where we are in life? I don't know where you are right now. Do you feel like life is pretty orderly, smooth, and making sense, or just makes no sense and it's a mess, or somewhere in between? It's the same life. It can just look very differently at different stages of life. However, as disciples, we are called to trust in God wholeheartedly, regardless of whether or not life seems to be going smoothly or it's just utter chaos. And so the gospel, I think, tonight gives us some fodder for reflection. So the passage that we heard from Mark's gospel, and let's just look at one or two sentences from that gospel. In those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Ugh. Right? This is scary stuff, right? That Mark is presenting us, right, from the lips of Jesus. Let's see what's going on in this gospel. There's a couple things we need to know about this gospel in order to understand it fully and grasp a message that applies to our lives. And two things I think are important for us to hold in mind about this gospel: the type of literature it is in this section and the political backdrop at the time it was written. So this is apocalyptic literature, right? Or meaning revelation. And it is bombastic. It's a style of literature that's just full of imagery, sometimes very bizarre imagery, right? Apocalyptic literature we hear in the Hebrew Testament, right? So the first reading proclaimed from the book of Daniel, that's apocalyptic literature. It's just full of all sorts of dire predictions about how horrible things might be, right? But it uses all sorts of imaginative language. It's not intended to be taken literally. Right? If you've ever read the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelations, you know what I'm talking about. Some people take that stuff literally, and that's scary because it's full of things that are very difficult to understand, what seems on the surface to be incredibly bizarre, right? That's the style of literature. But that style of proclamation, right, it was on the lips of Jesus that Mark recorded, usually came at a time of great tribulation. So the political backdrop, when this gospel was written, it was probably written in the area of Rome for the Christians living around Rome, about 30 or 40 years after the death of Christ, during the time of Caesar Nero, right, emperor of Rome. And what do we know about Nero? Was he a great guy, loved the Christians? Yeah, he loved to see them being eaten by lions, right? So there was a tremendous amount of persecution of the Christians at that time under Emperor Nero. And so it must have really felt to those people like the world was coming to an end, like the moon and the stars were all falling out of the sky, and it was all just horrible and chaotic and a mess. And Mark's gospel, in the words of Jesus, are there not so much to scare people with dire predictions, but to encourage people to remain wholehearted even when it seems like the stars are falling out of the sky, when things are that bad, when things are that chaotic, when things are that messy. So a lot of times people read those sections of the Bible that are apocalyptic in nature, and it sounds scary, but it's really meant to really toughen you up a little, because we know that maybe if we're not being persecuted, we are going to be challenged in life. And Jesus knew that about his disciples, and that's why he uses that type of bombastic, strong language, to get them ready, because there are going to be trials and tribulations, as there are in all of our lives at some point. Because as I said, sometimes life looks like this. It's nice and orderly. Other times it looks like this. It's just a mess. But the key is, are we going to remain faithful one way or the other? And that's Jesus' challenge to us through the Gospel of Mark, to stay wholehearted in good times and in bad. But we need to have a plan. Because let me ask you, when is the best time to prepare for a crisis in your life? When you're in the middle of the crisis? No. That's not the time to prepare for a crisis. The time to prepare for a crisis is all the time. All the time. So we need a crisis plan. And if you go into any large office building, or, maybe if you work for a company, you've been given the emergency plan, what to do in case of an emergency. Well, we all need to have an emergency plan for our lives, because we know that there are going to be times, when you get told, some devastating news about yourself or somebody you love. And that's not the time to start preparing for the crisis. No. When is the best time to start preparing for a crisis? Well, about 5 years ago. When is the second best time to start preparing for a crisis? Right now. Right now. So let me talk to you for a few minutes about what I see my plan is, all right? So that I can deal with the difficult times and remain wholehearted. And I do not mean to say I do it perfectly. That is not what I'm saying. But this is the plan. This is my emergency plan, right? Here it is, 4 steps. Pray regularly, sacraments regularly, community regularly, and serve regularly. See, because if we do these types of things regularly, then when hard times hit, we're much better prepared to handle. So let me just say a few words about each one of these things. Pray regularly. I mean, I've got to do that every day, whether I feel like it or I don't. And even if life is great, maybe I don't need to pray because really life is really good today. But no, I need to pray every day. Not start praying, when I'm on the verge of an anxiety attack. Right? No, just pray every day. Every day. Set aside time for prayer. And for me, I need some quiet time. Early morning is my best prayer time. I'm an early riser. I love to get up very early in the morning. That's my best time for prayer, or when I'm out exercising. But we got to be doing it every day. And then secondly, sacraments regularly. We need strength. Because our shoulders are just not strong enough to take on all of the burdens of life. And sacraments such as Eucharist, confession, those are the things that are like getting God's strength to help us, to give us strength in being wholehearted. And then community regularly. Because I need to be in touch with other people who can help me see the big picture, who can help me stay connected to God, right? Because sometimes when I'm like this, I need to be in community and around people who can remind me, don't worry, it's okay. Life is not so bad, right? So when I'm feeling like this, I need to be around people who are like this. But then I'm the person who's like this the other days. So that's why we need one another. Because sometimes I'm doing this for you, and other times you're doing this for me. Giving me a sense of God is here, God's in control, right? God has a plan for our lives, God has a plan for our community, God has a plan for our world, and we need a community that surrounds us to keep us in touch with the fact that God is in control. God has a plan. And then lastly, serve regularly. The best way to get out of ourselves sometimes is to do something for somebody else. When I'm a little too focused on myself, right, then I'm in trouble. And when I can kind of get outside of myself and focus on serving others, whether it be through parish ministries or in any other way, I'm just a better person. And I'm a happier person. But these are the ways, you may have other ways, but these are 4 ways that I think things I need to be doing regularly so that I'm building my strength, my spiritual strength, so that I remain wholehearted in good times and in bad, when life is nice and smooth and orderly, or life is just messy and chaotic. So that's my challenge to you. If you don't have a plan, like an emergency plan, that's something for contemplation during this Mass and as you go about your week. What's your plan? Do you have a plan in mind? Right? Because as I said, the worst time to plan for a crisis is when you're on the verge of having one. Right? It's all the other times of our lives that we're strengthening ourselves in our discipleship and commitment, remaining wholehearted to God. So that closes out our series, remaining wholehearted, being disciples who are with one another, committed to God, committed to serving one another and serving God. And what holds us all together through all of that is the knowledge that God's love is always with us, the power of God's word, as line of that gospel stated, the power of God's word is always with us. And that's what we celebrate at this Mass tonight. That whether or not your life is looking like this today or like this today, the main thing is that we're remaining wholehearted and being steadfast in the love of God.